Okay, well, we have a packed session for you. So let me at least quickly preview what we're going to cover. And probably Mayank is telling me like the number one question he's getting today is why is Wayfair at a travel conference? So so hopefully we'll answer that too. So let me talk a little bit about what we're going to cover, and then Mayank will quickly introduce himself. We're going to talk about 4 topics that he and I are getting the most questions on as we are working with teams that are shepherding AI initiatives across the organization. One is about how to get started, how do we get from AI curious to AI native. Second one is about how do we kind of build that core nerve center, what we are referring to as an enablement team within the organization. ROI is an important topic, especially during these times of macroeconomic uncertainty. And then the crux of the issue is about implementation. And we'll talk a little bit about that and some practical frameworks and how you want to think about implementation. But before that, Mayank, welcome to Skift. Welcome to a travel conference. Hopefully not your last one. But could you talk to everyone a little bit about, people might not be familiar with Wayfair, also your role, and maybe like share a favorite AI use case at Wayfair.
Thanks, Vivek, for having me. From the chuckles, I think you all know what Wayfair and who Wayfair is. But just for those who don't, Wayfair is a fairly large player in the home market. We serve about millions of customers with 30 million products in our catalog, so fairly sizable stuff to work with when it comes to AI. We started our journey selling online, but most recently have been in retail, physical retail. So if you haven't gone to one, please look us up. These are really cool spaces. My role at Wayfair is largely to pave the path for emerging tech, including Gen AI, for the rest of the organization. We solve for central platforms. We sort of build the last mile capabilities. So we can get others in the organization to go build cool experiences that you get to see.
And what's your favorite AI use case?
Well, there's quite a few of them. There's one that we recently released. It's called Muse. I think you see a little video of that. So I will sort of explain it this way. So if you're anything like me, you kind of sort of know what you want, but you don't quite have that style lingo. Like I still can't tell what's a modern farmhouse style versus something else. But I know if I see it, I can get it. Or even if I can describe it. That's essentially what Muse is, which is your sort of shopping partner, AI-driven shopping partner. If you see a style you want, you click on it. Or even you can upload a picture. I steal ideas from people's houses. And just upload a picture and it'll help you find your style. Like with 30 million products in the catalog, chances are we'll find your first personal style for that. So it shortens the journey from an inspirational idea to getting to the right product you want to buy.
And actually, in travel as well, we are seeing some parallels, like it's been talked about today, from like drop-down boxes to conversational search and some inspiration via social. So we are getting there. We are seeing some parallels, at least some early ideas of this. So let's dig into the content. The first part is about how do you get everybody who's excited and jazzed up about AI, from AI curious to AI native. And one of the proof points that we are seeing, like we observed as we were trying to prepare for this session, is around if companies invest in AI literacy for their team members, they have an outsized impact on AI initiatives. So very, very encouraging, and very early on we are seeing this kind of makes sense that they want to invest in it. You know, when we started talking about this and when we start thinking about how do you get that team structure, but most importantly, how do you get the cultural context, we talked about having a culture around experimentation. And you know, not just thinking about like going and rushing to buy the latest and newest AI tool, but also thinking about giving that permission within the organization to fail and to engage and to experiment. How have you thought about this in your own journey, and what best practices do you have around this?
Yeah, I think Wayfair has a history working with machine learning before Gen AI sort of came up. So we were sort of fairly attuned to engaging with emerging tech. So Gen AI, when it sort of came in, that was no different. But I think what helped was our leadership leaning in and sort of putting the creating the right nudges and encouragement along the way to sort of give the permission to go try this out safely and in a meaningful fashion. And so that sort of opened the doors for all parts of the organization to lean in and experiment. And what was interesting was to see not just the typical AI experts, but like folks in different parts of the organization who now had this power to go create fairly quickly. And so that sort of was a critical component. So I think it takes both bottoms up as well as top down enthusiasm and a set of guardrails to go do these things safely. When it comes to tools, I think there are some really cool tools out there. There's probably too many, candidly, but I think this is where the opportunity comes in, is to double click on what that person's job is, right? Just giving them one product, one sort of standard chat experience will not solve it for them. There's a lot of ecosystem you still have to build around it to make it useful. And I think that's where what we have found is investing in those sort of places is critical. Gen AI is, I think, a great equalizer, but you have to sort of do it in a very meaningful fashion. I also believe like your next best ideas are likely to come from parts of the organization you did not see technical innovation from, because now they have that tool to go build that from 0 to 60, but you got to kind of invest beyond just the tool, right? So it's getting them the right tool, getting them the right context, getting them and making them being able to solve these things within your ecosystem is a critical factor.
And actually, when we'll talk a little bit about implementation, this idea comes back again in terms of if you have the right cultural context within your organization, the various areas that you need to focus on, like areas of focus or areas of investment, can actually get supercharged as we think about AI implementation as well. Let's talk about enablement, because I think that's an important one. You want to create a nerve center within the organization that has the ownership and is responsible for driving these AI initiatives. You often start hearing this term center of excellence, but I think when we were thinking about this and we were reflecting on our own experiences, very quickly we realized that center of excellence is okay, but it should not become a center of innovation. So talk a little bit about that, why that terminology and why this nuance is important as you start thinking about this team.
Yeah. Candidly, you can call it whatever. So I lead a similar enablement function within Wayfair, and I think what was very clear, as you said, Vivek, for us was it's not the center of innovation, right? That's the whole point of Gen AI, that anybody with the right tools can start building things. So if you sort of centralize that, sort of limits the opportunity and possibilities of this tech. And so for us, the goal was how do we be the first sort of troops on the ground, so to speak, in this noisy space, make some sense, do some experiments, bring them within the organization, work with the right folks in compliance, legal, to sort of set the right guardrails, but sort of have a very clear focus that we're building to get started, not building to be the end goal. Right. And how do we do that in a purely enablement way? Like, we are not the center of innovation. That was the clear goal. We're purely enablement function. But it is a noisy space, so somebody has to lean in and do that and sort of unblock that. I believe we take probably, if we do it right, and we're still early ourselves, we'll probably take steps 1, 2, 3, steps 4 through 10 will come from different parts of the organization where they go apply it in their local context, their local jobs, their local business workflows. That's the real unlock of this. So you got to make somebody's job to go take the first 3 steps so to demystify it. And so you can sort of pave that initial path for others to be able to go build on that.
Yeah, and I think one of the initial proof points we saw around like building AI enablement functions or the nerve center is that whatever team you call it and however you build the team, to make sure that it's truly cross-functional, because that actually supercharges and brings the various specialist teams within the organization together. So I really like this proof point around that. And when I've seen this happen firsthand, one of the natural tensions is, should this team be a central team? Should this be a federated team, like distributed across the organization? There are pros and cons to that. We don't need to debate that right now. But you have recently experimented with a hybrid approach where it's neither central, neither distributed, but there's a middle of the path approach. Sometimes this thing always works, but like talk to me about a little bit about that.
Yeah, I think, as I said, I think for us, it's bringing the right people into the conversation. Chances are you have doers in your company that are already experimenting. Like, find those people. They're already doing it, even if you have not officially asked them to. And the fact remains, these are the people who are going to set the tone for how to apply these things. Bring them in, not just to advise, but to co-create. We're doing that in different parts of our targeted investments right now. And so that's sort of the part A of this. Part B of this is you got to skill up everybody around you. You got to get trainings done, hackathons, innovation challenges, whatever works. We do all of them. You got to get people engaged in trying things, get them to a point where they start asking the question, could I do this with this? And that's where you have started to sort of create that innovation momentum. And what teams will inevitably find that you can go from a clever prompt to an MVP fairly quickly, but sort of going from there to a production-grade solution, that's still a gap. And that's where your enablement function steps in with those sort of core group of advisors and co-creators who are solving for those last-mile capabilities.
So multiple paths to success. You can organize the team in different ways, either have a central team distributed or a hub and spoke. But the idea is that if the focus is on shared success, shared goals, and the enablement becomes the core focus, then that actually produces real outcomes. Let's talk ROI. All of the initiatives have to produce value. They have to be outcome focused. And one of the proof points that I really liked in the early research on AI around ROI is the fact that ROI needs to be an ongoing governance topic, should not just be an upfront investment ask or a green lighting the initiative topic, but an ongoing focus to improve and evolve the AI initiatives. So I really like both these data points that talk to that fact. ROI is a very quick trap you can fall into, and kind of people look at it to decide whether it's a success or a failure. Talk about your own experiences thinking about ROI in the context of AI.
Yeah, I think what I think we all will agree is things that were not possible with AI now can be done fairly cheaply. So I think that needs to be baked into the ROI conversation. ROI is important, right? We all get funding to get some outcomes, so ignoring it is not an option. But I think what is the right thing to do here, or at least for us has worked out, is you got to prioritize the things that matter to your organization, that matter to your outcomes, but also sort of start with things you can already clearly measure, places where you have baselines, places where you have clear KPIs, because it's critical to start with what's your goal from it. Are you experimenting? Are you doing some net new opportunity unlock? Are you improving an existing experience? And so starting with the latter typically is a good place because your teams are also sort of learning, and they can then step back and understand the total cost of running this. Like typical thought processes, it's the model cost and it's pennies on the dollar. But running a production-grade system requires a lot of the fundamentals that need to be put in place. I think the other aspect that I would note is typically GenAI gets a lot of investments for customer-facing things. We've seen quite a few of those examples. But don't sort of overlook your internal operations, right? These are places where it will greatly benefit to accelerate a lot of your operations. An example from Wayfair is like our legal and compliance team sifts through millions of product feedback to identify potential products that have hazards and remove them from the catalog fairly quickly. Now, this is not an experience that you as a customer would ever see directly, but you will benefit from it. And to be able to do that at the scale was not as feasible before for this. So I think from an ROI point of view, it's important to sort of step back and sort of understand both the total cost of it and also places where it's sort of unlocking opportunities that were previously pretty hard to get.
Perfect. Let's talk implementation. And this is where the real impact happens. The real challenges also come into play. I love this recent coverage from Benedict Evans. If you've not seen AI Eats the World, it's a great deck. It's a great resource. And you can see the disparity between AI pilots and AI production-grade initiatives. And you can see that a lot more pilots than actually in production environment. Talks to, again, the challenge around how difficult this is and how difficult these are to bring them to life and make them generally available. But it begs the question, like, how do we think about a framework, a simplified way of doing this? Mayank and I put together this like fairly simple implementation framework, more around like what are the areas that you need to look at when you're thinking about AI. And one of the nice things I like about this, and we'll walk you through it, is that it's equally applicable to generative AI, broadly AI, but also agentic AI initiatives. And so the way to think about this, it's almost multiple layers. And if you look at it bottom up, it talks about infrastructure services and what you need to provision within the organization. And then at the top, you talk about the application layer. Like, what are you interacting with? It could be a chatbot, it could be an API, or it could be a consumer-grade application. And then the verticals are, across the board, governance, compliance, and ethics and responsibility, depending upon the context and how some of these things are important. Everything does not apply to every AI initiative, but this is kind of a nice blueprint, a simplified way to think about this. I've hit on most of these things, but I know you're passionate about a couple of things in this around orchestration or context. What jumps out at you? What are some of the easy pitfalls? What people should be focused on?
Yeah, I think models is a place where everybody starts because there's a model every week, maybe like 5 sometimes every week. And I think these are awesome innovations, and these models are getting really good and cheap to use. But what is sort of, I think some of the speakers earlier on said this as well, is your context, your data, and how you apply it still matters. Your domain specificity still matters. I think the opportunity in the ecosystem is how do you make it seamlessly available across your applications so your developers, your analysts, whoever is building these experiences is not doing this from scratch. That's the big sort of unlock in sort of making that investment upfront is critical. It's not just the data, it's also how you make it available. Lots of standards have emerged recently and making it sort of easier, especially if you're starting to think about agentic capabilities. This fundamental investment will sort of stand those sort of design pattern evolutions. The second part of this, which I would call out, is the orchestration layer, right? Especially if you're going from simple applications, LLMs wrapped applications to agentic experiences. This is another area where you sort of stitch stuff together, right? It's just where my model comes to meet my prompt with my data and how I want it to orchestrate, and then sort of starts leaning into what sort of on the side you see observability. To me, that's sort of the most sort of afterthought thing. And many times these are non-deterministic systems. What works in testing and development may not work the same way in production, let alone if the underlying model or the prompt changes. And so setting those baselines, investing in sort of monitoring them continuously over a period of time to make sure it's on brand, it's speaking the same way you would speak, it's not hallucinating and so on. It's an important critical investment that all your applications, internal or external, need that. And so investing upfront to sort of make it easier for your users to be able to build on that is sort of critical. I mean, this is a high-level view. It's a 10,000-foot level view. We could probably spend like an hour double-clicking on each of these sections, but the intent of this is don't think of it as an AI stack per se, but think of it more as building blocks to your ecosystem and what you need to invest in, regardless if you're buying a tool or you're building something internally. These layers need to come in place together. And I think the opportunity, which is very clear, is regardless where you're on that journey of AI, either it's early on or agentic capabilities, these fundamental investments will be an accelerator. And sort of helping your teams go 0 to 100 will require that level of investment.
So if you think of like pulling this together, the 4 topics we covered, multiple takeaways, but think very carefully about setting the tone for AI and bootstrapping your culture. We talked about that. Thinking about like a core enablement function, not necessarily a center of innovation, but as a center of excellence or a center of enablement, not getting too caught up on the ROI. And I think on the implementation framework, the other thing that I really liked is that if you start laying out all these things in front of you, you can ask the question, what do you want to own versus what do you want to partner with third-party companies for the long run? Because there are a lot of companies who are there to help. Just thinking through that is also a good frame of mind. I want to end with this. One of the topics we hear a lot about is how is AI going to disrupt my travel business? And I really like this example that Benedict Evans shared of the last platform transformation that happened. And what did it mean to a company like Uber, and what did it mean to a company like Airbnb? The fundamental question here is that everybody thinks that AI is going to disrupt. We're not doubting that. But disruption can take many different forms. And what disruption Uber did to its business fundamentally changed user behavior. But if you make a healthy argument on Airbnb, you can say that while Airbnb has disrupted a periphery of hospitality and travel, hotels have thrived in that same period. So I think a fundamental question for all of us is how are we thinking about AI in our own context, but how are we also thinking about the disruption that we want to bring to our respective marketplaces? Thank you so much for your time. Mayank and I are around for the rest of the day if you have any other questions or any other comments and feedback, and enjoy the rest of the summit. Thank you.